Check, check, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2. Okay, cool. Ugh. Sorry, guys. I got forced to update, and I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely gonna break everything, but it didn't. All right, let's get started.
Just really aggressive, yeah.
Who are they signed to? They were signed to PSC, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They
Yeah, that's why.
Right.
And I'm actually a pretty staunch defender, before people like hate me too much, of PSC bans. Like, because I have seen cases, we've all seen cases where PSC will drain the life out of a band, you know. But I've also seen plenty of cases where PSC has empowered bands like Rave to like try all these different things before they settle on their final identity. And I think there's some value to that, you know.
I'll never forgive them for ruining Vivid. I love Vivid.
No one will.
I'll never forget.
Oh my god. They like ruined Vivid.
They really did.
Vivid's like first big single was like the bomb, and then
which one was that? Was that
the one where they're all sparkly and they're
was
like
that the 69
they were vivid.
Yeah.
That was one of the first bands I was like, it got to a point where I was like, so it's a visual K band, but like no makeup, huh? Like,
yeah.
I think that's visual K like right now.
Even more than like during Grey. Like all right, what's going on, everybody? I got confused there for a bit. Yeah, I was just I started I was just playing a clip that was one of my more favorite moments from the podcast. James will never forgive. The topic of tonight's first stream, PSC for ruining one of his favorite bands, Vivid. So that's what that was. Yeah, so this is a doubleheader tonight. I'm calling it that. We got 2 streams, one right after the other. These are streams that were requested by very, very special patron named Kimiko. She donates at our one of our higher tier levels, and on Patreon, which you can actually sign up for. The link in the description. We have everything from $1 all the way up to like some pretty high level stuff. With rewards, for all that stuff. However you want to support the site is fine. We want to keep all of this free regardless, so your support is always appreciated. But Kimiko's been very patient as I've been horribly waylaid the last 5 months or so. So we have I'm doing a bunch of her topic requests that have been backlogged, so that we're all nice and caught up. So we're going to do 2 tonight, 2 tomorrow. So these are topics that she's picked out. And so, yeah, this is the first one. So the first one is PSC. Specifically kind of the absolute state of PSC, I guess, is like a way to describe it. Like, maybe like what happened. to PSC, like what's going on with them, and really to in order to answer this, there's only so much I know about the behind the scenes that goes on at PSC, and even if I knew it, there's only so much that I would even be allowed to disclose. So I think the best way for us to kind of go through and get like a good handle on what the current state of PSC is like is to do like a bit of a recap, go through like all of the stuff that's happened and over the years, like all the activity, and then we can kind of talk about it at the end. All that being said, I'm sure everybody has their own opinions on this record label. If you do, you can leave them in the chat. I will. You're free to give them, of course. I will read them and address them. Any which way I can. But just up front, I won't be doing any like gossip or any or insider speak or anything like that. So this is going to be a lot of factual information first, of just a bunch of notable events that you can kind of draw an interpretation from, and then followed by a bit of speculation on my part at the end. The rise and fall of PSC. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I suppose. And we'll get to that. I suspect a lot of you will kind of infer that if you're not already familiar with the story of PSC and like what they've been up to over the last decade, really 2 decades at this point, a decade and a half. Just bear with me a little bit. I'm going to be pulling up a lot of links. I'm going to be pulling up a lot of different things as we go through this. I got a whole little outline and everything. I did my God's honest best to do like the homework for this, because God knows I forgot half of this, and and if we end up running a little bit late for the stream, that starts at 9, since I'm already starting kind of late. Sorry about that, by the way. I let some of you know I was going to be running a little bit late in Discord. I just need to reboot my computer. Rebooting my computer caused my streaming software to install and update, and that took like a while as well, and reset a bunch of stuff. So we'll get this figured out eventually. I can only guarantee the Saturday streams are going to start on time and without a hitch at this point, moving forward. So, let me know what you guys think in the chat as I go through all this. I'll read through some stuff out at the end. Hopefully we have some time. And as always, if you enjoy this stream, feel free to please leave a like, share it with your friends. If the spirit moves within you, you can give a donation on our Streamlabs link. It acts like a super chat. It'll show a little GIF below me, and it'll show your message. I'll read out your message. So then I'll be forced to read out very opinionated statements about PSC. Oh boy, that's gonna be fun. So. I may have just set myself up for trouble. But anyways, okay, so for those of you who don't know, PSC is a Visual Kei record label. They're a record label that strongly, almost entirely focuses on Visual Kei or Visual Kei related artists. They're one of the most well-known in the industry. There's bands like Alice 9, artists like Miyavi and the Gazette, either are or have been at different points in their career signed to this label. So they are kind of really largely responsible for the boom of, like, I would say the neo-Visual Kei that you saw in the 2000s maybe, and then maybe the mainstream, the mainstreaming of it in the early 2010s. for the context of why this was made a topic, if you're not familiar with this, you know, they're not very active anymore. These are like for a record label, I suppose. You know, a lot of the major record labels have taken some serious hits. Honestly, I could do one of these on Danger Crew next. But these are all the artists that are currently signed to PSC, and we will or working with PSC. And we'll get back to this in a second, but they've got a really long and storied history. Visual Kei would not be the way it is without, you know, the artists that, you know, came up through this company, that were signed by this company. So we're just going to get into it. PSC, by the way, is actually short for Phonetically Syndicalism Company. I don't know if they still kind of go by that or use that. They have a more modern logo now. The logo I used in the title is the one that most people are familiar with, or in the thumbnail, I mean, sorry. It's more of a, I guess it's more of a throwback to like 2009, you know, and everything like that. So, they also, like, one more reference before we start diving into the official history and everything like that. They started out as a branch of Free Will, which is the record label that you know, Dynamite Tommy you know, started, but they separated quite a while ago, so they are very much their own separate thing at this point. But that's where they came from in the beginning. Yeah, I think that's enough general context. So without further ado, and I guess the other thing is, like, if you're really unfamiliar with PSC, there's a lot of contention among fans about the way bands, artists that are signed to them, tend to change, we'll put it that way, or, you know, different decisions that they've made in terms of managing artists, or the direction that artist music seems to go in. You know, there's a lot of fan speculation and criticism. You know, there's a bit for and a bit against, because the bands that they were, you know, when they were in their heyday, you know, they were very popular. So it's like, well, I mean, I like this. But then at the same time, you know, some trouble was noticed. Like, you know, there's some trouble afoot, especially these last few years. As you can kind of see now, I'm giving you the spoiler now, there's not a lot of bands signed to them. So obviously a lot of things have happened. So with all that out of the way, we can get into the history. So PSC started out in 1999, actually. They, at the very beginning, they were managing, I guess, basically small bands, no-name bands that just had failed to make it into the music business. Their big break, actually, was signing Dula Quartz, which was Miyavi's first band that he was the guitarist in. They started slowly adding more bands in the, I guess I should pull up some of these artist images and stuff like that as we go through it. But they started adding more bands in like the early 2000s. And then they really started to blow up in around, I would say, the period from 2002 to 2005. Which was when they signed a lot of very, very notable bands that they ultimately ended up showcasing in their 2005 Peace and Smile Carnival Festival. And I will pull up some of those right here. But yeah, really, that was like, I mean, looking at their history, that was like, the best decisions they made were, I mean, it was definitely across that. But let's see. It's kind of hard to find stuff from 2005 for that. But a lot of notable bands were at that festival that they had signed at this point, which included Miyavi, The Gazette, who you can see featured right here. They made it. they're still around. Alice 9, and who else? Kagra and Kara, who is also featured here. And we'll get into all of those in a second. So those 5 bands, and and PSC in general, they really kind of blossomed, I would say, over like the course of the 2000s. Obviously, like, especially, like, those are huge names, especially Miyavi, the Gazette, outside. Kagra was very beloved as well. Kara has always been very popular. So in 2009, they had their second Peace and Smile. Let's see, where's it? Their second Peace and Smile Carnival Festival, and that was like their 10th anniversary. Let me see if I can find a decent photo for that. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's kind of old. It's kind of grainy. It's a magazine. Can we even zoom in? Can we zoom in? Yeah, so it's gonna be hard to kind of see. I found a cool magazine cover, so yeah. So I mean, you can see Show from Alice 9. This is the the vocalist of Kara, and his name is escaping me. Miyavi. This is Ruki from the Gazette, and the vocalist of Kagra as well. So nice little throwback here. There were 2 notable additions in the 2009 one. There was they were indie bands. The first one was let's do. I can do. Oh man, if I can find a 2009 image of them, that'd be really funny. Yeah, here we go. First one was Sug. PSC signed Sug as one of their initial indie bands. Many of you are familiar. They obviously became very, very popular. And then the other one, yeah. Well, I don't know if that's 2009. I can do, yeah, sure. These old photos, am I right, guys? Like, bringing back memories. Before we had before we had decent image quality online. The other one was Screw. So really, at this point, by the time they got to their 5th or their 10th anniversary, they were really like full on. They had their major bands, their major powerhouses, and then they had their indie bands on their indie PSC company, and they were kind of taken off from there. Let's see who else. They continued to pick up steam a bit. Side note, in 2008, I should probably pull this one up in case people aren't familiar since they're gone now. Yeah. Let's see. They also signed a little indie band by the name of Born. We'll get to higher quality photos as we get closer to the present. Born, which is a much beloved indie band, or was, and they were quite a fun band, quite a fan favorite. They were definitely a VKH favorite. Let's see who else. Oh, and then how could we forget? In 2009. Let's see here. What's the most 2009 looking? We can just go with this one. I think it's a little bit later, but 2009 they signed, can you guess? Vivid. Now, Vivid, all of these bands obviously ended up becoming big deals, or most of them did. Vivid was a huge deal. They were, especially overseas, like people loved them. We loved them. They were, in my opinion, they were peak Kira K. So, you know, if you've ever watched the Bleach anime series and you've seen the Visual K, Neo Visual K, Kira. Doubt. It is Doubt. D = out. Yeah, Kimiko got it. So yeah. Is the stream buffering for you guys? Uh-oh. I will double check. Let me double check the settings real quick just to be sure. I do have DVR on, so you should be able to, hopefully, you know, the connection will kick in okay. It's telling me the stream health is okay, but we'll see. We'll see how it holds up. So, okay, sweet. Yeah, for context, it's kind of storming over here in weird ways, so you know, fingers crossed, but I tested the connection a little bit before going live. It seemed okay. Anyways, so yeah, so that's Doubt in 2010. So they're like, you know, again, like hit after hit after hit after hit like this, basically. And so that was about the time, you know, from that point on, you know, they were like, they were really kind of shooting to the top, you know. But I mean, it's just a lot of really successful bands. Like Sug started indie, became a successful major band. Screw started indie, became a major band. I think was fairly successful. Doubt was wildly successful, probably as successful as Sug, or close to it. The Gazette, obviously, smash hit. The Miyavi, you know, there's a lot of fans that still consider his neo-visualism era, or his Kabuki Boys era. I guess that would be what, like 2006 to 2009-ish. Maybe that's a little too broad, but you know, that era was when he was signed to PSC. A lot of people consider that to be his best work still. You know, especially a lot of the more Visual K inclined Miyavi fans. Born was, I don't think Born ever went major, but unless someone can correct me and tell me if they did, I don't believe they did. They might have had this like pseudo major thing. I know that's happened a couple times where it's like it's half in like pseudo indie kind of thing. But you know, Born was a very popular underground band that was built right into their DNA and their personality. Vivid obviously took off big time, and you know, again, like Kagura was much beloved, Caro is much beloved. All of these bands there weren't any duds really, you know. So Girl says, I think Born stayed indie. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so what happened? Because obviously all of these bands that I've had to pull up images for and stuff like that, they're not here, which, like, so what's been going on? Let's go through it, because the reality of the situation is a lot of different things happened, and some things are kind of, there's some things that there's a running through line of causality, but really, quite frankly, it was a lot of different events happening. So you'll see some trends, but I looking at it like listed out like this, I kind of underappreciated just the bad luck involved with this as well. I usually attribute that to like Danger Cruise, like kind of, rise and then kind of fall was like a lot of bad luck. PSC didn't have as much fully bad luck in my opinion, but it's a lot of it's still a good amount of bad luck. So we'll start with what happened first. So Miyavi in 2009, he announced that he was graduating from PSC after 10 years, and that was around the time that he signed to Universal, I believe, and then later on EMI, and now I don't even remember where. He's got his own company, he does his own thing anyway. So that's when he shed the Visual K, traditional Visual K looks that he had, and stripped the band down to just him and a drummer and started traveling the world. And that's kind of the start of the more modern Miyavi that we all know. So he started most of that after he after he graduated from PSC. So that was when they, I guess, quote unquote, lost Miyavi. Next up is Kagra. Kagra disbanded in 2011, I believe, but they announced it in 2010. As a final request for the members, they have asked us to, instead of using the word disbanded, called a demise instead. This is a very old article from us, so I'm not entirely sure or call it a demise instead, so I'm not entirely sure what the context for that might be. But you'll see a string of bad news, starting around here, basically. But that was they had a 10-year run, and then they ended up disbanding in 2011. The vocalist ended up passing away later on, so there's really no realistic opportunity, I think, for any kind of reformation of the band. Since there's no picture here, because that's how long ago this was, let me see if I can just so you guys can see, in case you're not familiar with Kagra. So for those of you who aren't familiar but are also into bands like Kiryu, specifically, and other bands that are like Angora K, since a lot of bands from Angora K these days are kind of derived from Kiryu. A huge amount of what Kiryu does would not be able to exist without Kagra. Kagra was really like the more modern, I guess the more modern force that like codified like certain styles in Angora K, and really made like the more experimenting with like traditional sound, like traditional Japanese instruments, and making really pleasant rock music, and also some kind of darker underground sounding, almost, I guess, ominous like rock music using those same instruments. I've heard a little bit of that from them as well, which was the thing that Kiryu really capitalized on to gain popularity. But all of the melodic side of Kiryu, especially all of the soft side, like a lot of that is derived from Kagra. So them disbanding was very unfortunate. People were very upset. It's very, very sad. Kagra was before my time personally, so I kind of largely still have to go back and reference them, but it is kind of something that, you know, we're missing out on these days. Kiryu really isn't like a one-to-one replacement from Kagra, you know, but as much as they're heavily inspired by Kagra, they're much more energetic. I think people liked Kagra for the elegance in their music, and you know, it's kind of a secondary nice to have that Kiryu has these days. But a band like Kagra that really kind of focused on the elegance and stuff like that's you know, we could use another one of those in Angurke. So yeah, so that's Kagra gone. Now we go to, make sure I have the URL. Yeah. Now fast forward to 2012. Sug announces that they're going on hiatus and leaving PSC. This is what they look like at this point, by the way. It's very, you know, their music is kind of started to mature, and, you know, there's like a higher production value and quality to their sound and their look at this point. This single that this was for is Sweet Toxic. And that really was, that was like the most mainstream I think I've seen Sug go. And it's interesting that they ended up leaving PSC after this. They went on hiatus. They came back as an indie band. And it's all interesting because, you know, in the statement, basically, in the statement he gave at the time, the vocalist Takeru, he said, it feels like a betrayal to the fans and to the band members. Excuse me, let me zoom back in. It feels like a betrayal to the fans and to the band members if they continue on like this, so they have decided on a hiatus. And then when they came back, you know, their music was like wildly different. It was almost like they'd been wildly different by comparison. It was almost like they'd become unchained. They still claimed in their, you know, in their interview with us, like a year or two after they came back, that they were Osharike. That's what sent us off, like going down the path of like, how can the band that's dressed in like all black and white and doing street fashion be Osharike? But it's basically like they migrated out of the Genki Osharike that has all the crazy bright colors and everything, and got them super successful on PSC. And they went to like this street gothic style that Takeru's kind of carried into his solo project with Sleepyhead, now that Sug is disbanded. But this was the first time for me personally that it was like seeing them come back, especially, and like their first single back, they were going especially hard, and it was like, oh, this is that was the first time I was like, something might be up here, you know. Fans will speculate on anything, but this was really like for me personally, when I was just, you know, still just a reviewer of VKH at the time, I was like, what's going on here? That's interesting. So yeah, so that's Sug. So we're at 2012. Next up we have, we're going to fast forward to 2014. Uh-oh. The page I'm looking for doesn't exist. I must have, oh, sorry, I think I copied over something extra. Or I left out the HTTP. Okay. So Alice 9 left PSC in, they're also called PS Company, by the way. I'm just going to go with PSC. That's cool with you guys. Alice 9 left PSC in 2014. The official statement on their website said the band and PSC will go their separate ways 2 days after the 10th anniversary. And then the two that we had here were the bassist Saga said, "We've made it these 10 years, and undeniably we had our struggles with the company's president and staff." Interesting. Struggles with the company's president and staff. The choice to leave was not a simple one. We as a band wanted to get back to basics in the truest sense, to what Alice 9 really is. There is no security as a band. We chose to walk this difficult road, and with our 10-year milestone coming up, that became the drive we needed to do this. Then the vocalist show said, is there anything special in here? I feel that taking this step, starting over from scratch and going back to basics is perfect for our 10th anniversary. So that's another one, and that was a, even more of a statement that, as you can obviously see here with the undeniably we had our struggles with the company's president and staff. Any of you who were around at the time listening to Alice 9, their final release was Supernova Symphonia, their Supernova Symphonia DVD. That was for their album, their last major album, Supernova. Supernova was a very, very mainstream friendly album, flirted heavily with the mainstream. I thought a lot of it was pretty good personally, but they were very, very much like integrating pop music, electronic music, overpowering some of the rock music to a certain degree in different in various songs. Again, it's more like even more so in this case, it was a very mainstream experimentation with their sound, and then they end up leaving PSC, and then they come back as A9. As an indie band, they launch a Kickstarter to kickstart their first EP, which I thought was kind of cool. I think more bands should do that, normalize that, and then the music that they were putting out was much more experimental again. They were still playing around with electronic music, but they were like going wild with it, or they were they were still making pop rock music because that's what they were known for, but they were like taking risks, with it, and as you've seen more and more, they've gotten more and more experimental and divisive with the stuff that they've put out. It's not easy to have a conversation about A9's music and have everyone on the same page these days, and usually that's like a net positive for an artist, so bit of a pattern started to form here. One could argue. Let's see. Then another big one happened in 2015, January 2015. Damn it. What am I doing that's not getting that over? It must just be my the notes I'm copying it over from. Okay. Vivid disbanded. This was this one I saw coming. I saw coming from quite a while away. As you might have heard on the podcast, as you can see by the end of their career, the makeup was almost entirely gone, largely gone. Very Host Club Boys look, I would say. Very Host Club Boys look. Much Host Club Boys. I don't know. That's my main. That's the first thing I noticed from it. The music had started to become very, very mainstream as well. And while like their music inherently was like just really popular in the mainstream, they started to run out of gas. So you could kind of see this one coming. But I will point out that this all started, I would say that change all started once they went major. And they signed to Indie PSC and went major through PSC. So make of that what you will. Statement from Shin. I'll just read the statement from Shin because there's a lot of statements here. But from the vocalist Shin, who now has his own side project, we did a live stream listening party to react to his latest album. You should check that out. So Vivid will disband after our live at Pacifico Yokohama on April 29th. Thank you for all to those who have continued to support us. And as one life ends with Vivid, I've decided I'm ready to be reborn from the beginning. As to not have any regrets behind as Shin from Vivid, the answer was found in multiplying my life. I'm betting my all on this now. Until the moment the final curtain drops, I will continue to sing for you who have supported us. Maybe I'll look through these real quick. So Reno says, while it deeply pains me to think of what the fans feel about this announcement of our discussion, I will continue playing music until the day I die, even more sincerely than now. I've always felt that Vivid was all about aiming for the future and dreams. Now suddenly the things you've wanted to express and the music have stopped. Through my experience in Vivid, I have a different view of the future. The five of us started to have different feelings on our music and activities as a band, and so things became difficult. I leave no regrets. Looking for reasons they disbanded, like official reasons they disbanded. Very long statements for this disbandment. I actually really appreciate it. And then Cookie. We decided to disband this past spring. We had all been discussing our activities for the future for quite some time, and these talks led to the decision to disband. It was so painful performing live, knowing we would break up. Felt like we were lying to you. Oof. I'd start remembering things and just cry during shows. We're not disbanding because we've grown to hate each other or the band itself, or because of something any one person has done. However, through Vivid, I have grown and found my way. And to continue on my journey through adulthood, we decided to disband. Yeah, so, and they were only around for 6 years, so it was a hell of a 6 years. Yeah, it was, it was very unfortunate. You could kind of tell it was like they had kind of all differing views on how the music should go. It was being reflected in the music. Yeah. So again, we're at January 2015 was when this announcement went out. Now things start to ramp up. Okay. Fast forward a year. Well, let me put this in here and see if it actually loads. Yeah, okay. I'm testing my links offline since for some reason when I paste them in directly, it's not working. Okay. Fast forward a year, Born announces that they're going to disband. This one sucked really bad for a lot of fans, especially international fans. They ended up disbanding. Their last performance was May 26th of 2016. Yeah, that one just sucked. I don't know what else to say. Born was a really fun band to listen to and to follow. Next up, in April 2016, the announcement was in March, but the there we go. Doubt's contract that they had with PSC expired and they opted to not renew it. So this was pretty surprising because Doubt, I mean, to me at least, because, well, on paper it was surprising, but in the context at the time, I kind of understood at the same time. Doubt had really been on fire since they'd like gone major with PSC, and just had like all kinds of like hit singles, and it's all really juicy, like fun, well produced, like pop rock music. It was like genuinely well done. It wasn't like cheap or just like appealing to mainstream. It's like they really earned like the popularity they had. I believe the last album that they put out while they were on PSC kind of felt it was a different shift for them, and it I think fell flat to a certain degree, or definitely flew under the radar for a lot of people. So I think it was actually given that, I guess it wasn't as much of a shock. But again, with Doubt, when they left, they went indie. They came back, and their music was wildly experimental. It was like all these other artists. It was like the same core personality, but just with all this like more wilder experimentation with like song structure and how many different like melodies of how many different instruments and backing tracks you could fit into one part of a song at the same time, and all that stuff. So it's like an established pattern at this point that this is what's happening. I think my favorite stuff by Doubt still came out, like, is still the stuff that came out during the height of their PSC era, but like their indie stuff is still really solid. Like their indie stuff, their second indie stuff. Now that they've left PSC. And then a month or so later, if I can bring this up. A month or so later, we get hit with another stinger, which is that Screw announces that they're going to disband. This one was like really upsetting for a lot of fans. It was about as big of a deal as Born disbanding, if not more. Personally, I completely lost interest in Screw from the moment. Actually, like slightly before they went major, because I was so into Screw and their indie phase. Screw is the one band that I will be like an absolute hipster asshole about, like, because they're kind of like darker, more like harder indie stuff was so psychotically fun to listen to that when they dropped it and became more of like a more of a imitation neo Visual K band, kind of turned me off a lot to them. I got into them when they put out Psycho Monsters, which was like their, attempt at like playing around with like the electronic music craze that was going on at the time. But and there's a few things here and there that like stuck out as like that was really cool, that like things they tried. But I like overall I was super like, this would be the example. Screw would be a good example I would point to for like this is a PSC band that seems to be imitating another PSC band. I guess I think this would be the biggest one, and I guess the context for all of this is that while all of this is going on across these years, the Gazette is just flying high. Like they're doing fine, they're doing just fine. They're doing all these different things, they're setting all these different trends. And so when when the other PSC bands come out a couple years later emulating some of those same trends, it gets the noggin jogging, I guess you could say. It really makes you think, makes you a little concerned. Like it's like the, kind of makes you just activates those almonds, you know what I mean? Yeah, so that's my I guess that's my I'll put the leash back on my opinions on Screw. And then I think the more recent development that we could also talk about, because this is a lot, like, you know, obviously, like that I've gone through, like a lot of loss for the company if you're looking at it from PSC's perspective. You know, whether it's because it's a disagreement between the band and the company, whether like the band just kind of naturally is just time to disband, or whether it's because of like just unforeseen circumstances, you know, things like that. It's at the bottom line for PSCs, this is a lot of loss. So most recently in 2018, I have a couple more to point out after this, but like in terms of like the big highlights, I guess. So the Gazette established a new company this summer called Heresy Incorporated. And basically they've restructured themselves so that they've moved from they've moved to under their own company, which is Heresy Incorporated. And so they've like PSC is no longer all the stuff that they were handling is now being handled by Heresy Incorporated. The catch is that last I checked, the CEO of Heresy Incorporated is the same CEO as is also the CEO of PSC. So it's more of a, it's not like they're completely separate. Obviously the Gazette's still listed on their website. There's a partnership here. There's probably various things that they still manage or handle to a certain degree. It's just when you've gotten as big as the Gazette has gotten, which is very, very big, there's a lot of advantages to restructuring under your own company so that all of the focus and the business model and strategy is all on, you know, just this one band, because this one band is now able to sell music, go on tours, fashion lines, art shows, and like perfume lines in Rookie's case for those last two. You know, I just found out, I didn't even know, but like Owie has his own record label, you know, like, so it's like at this point where you know, it makes sense to restructure like this. So this one isn't like so much of a this one isn't exactly like news or bad news, in my opinion. It's not like relevant news to this topic, I guess. Because it's not really a loss. It's just kind of like a transfer or a shift. I don't know if they're taking less of a cut now or anything like that. But again, same CEO. I don't know if there was something else I was going to say about that. No, I don't think so. Yeah, there's just not a. It's something that happened. I guess it's like they're not directly. You wouldn't directly view them as directly under the umbrella of PSC anymore. But honestly, here at VKH, based on the press releases we've been getting over the last few years, we never really did. They make a point of saying that they've been like self-produced like their entire career. You know, they seem to just be able to do whatever they want, and PSC lets them, quote unquote. You never really see the Gazette like following a trend from another PSC band, I'll just put it that way, or even, you know, from many other Visual K bands. You know, maybe like super established ones, like obviously they take influence from Lunacy and you know, some various paths that Duran Gray's trailblazed in different points in their careers, you could say. But they kind of operate like they don't, for the reputation that I hear a lot of fans talking about, like giving or attributing to PSC, the Gazette's never really operated like that. Like they don't operate like they're like under lock and key and being bossed around by you know, by this bossy record label, which is kind of how I see, you know, the general view of PSC, or I had in the past, when there was still a lot of artists on the label. And I'm not saying that's an invalid view of the label. It's just, I'm saying, like, you know, it's not, for whatever reason, which I can only speculate on because I don't have any inside knowledge and, you know, and all that, but like, they leave the Gazette alone. my personal speculation is that they let the money making band just do whatever they want because everything they do is making a lot of money. So that's what happened there. And that would also make sense as to why they're letting them restructure under their own company so that they can focus on growing even more, making even more money. I think PSC is obviously, in my opinion, speculation again. The show's for entertainment purposes only. I would say, I would just say it's been for like a good solid 5 years or more that PSC's kind of viewed the Gazette as like the best people to be the masters of their destiny, of their own destiny, like the most lucrative. So, yeah, I would just say that. Some other ones that were more recent developments may have flown under your guys' radar, maybe not. This first one is the Lotus. So the Lotus was signed in 2000. What do I have? They were signed in 2014, and they really weren't around for very long before they were signed. I don't even know if they were around a year. They might have been around a year, and then PSC picked them up and signed them. And really, like, when they started putting out music through PSC, it really felt like they were trying to make another Gazette, like, which I feel like you could say has been attempted a few times at PSC, but like especially with the Lotus, it was like you could really feel like they were trying to make another Gazette to like a certain degree, because it was like this neo-visual K. It's like it would be Kira Kira K if it wasn't for the fact that there was like a solid hard rock side to it that they were really holding on to, and you know, very new, and just like skewing to like a bit of the neo-visual style a bit more. It was like a glossier kind of Gazette. It was okay, was the problem. There wasn't anything like remarkable, I guess, about like what they were doing. I still like listened to a couple of their songs. Girl says the one guy was from Lolita 23Q, if I remember right. Yeah, I don't remember which band member it was, but yeah, but they ended up leaving in let's see. They ended up leaving PSC to go off on their own in 2016, and then they disbanded in 2017. So yeah, they'd lost a guitarist, and then they left PSC, and then they disbanded. So that kind of went nowhere. And then the last one that's, I mean, that ultimately went nowhere. They were around for a little bit, but not that long. And then the last one that I would say overall right now is like a net positive. We'll see if they stay together, but I really hope they do, because I like them, is Rave. So Rave is kind of, I mean, they're Osharike as far as I'm concerned. Like you're looking at like the most toned down look of Rave right here, but I'm just pulling this up because this was their first look post PSC. But basically they are kind of like so they signed to PSC in 2014. They also signed very early after they put out a single called Zetsudan, I believe, and it was very good, and it was like they were all on their own, and then they got picked up by PSC on the indie side, I believe, and they were really successful with that one single. I think at least it got a lot of views on YouTube for like a nobody band at the time, and they got picked up by PSC in 2014, and then like for their entire time they were there, PSC really like ran them through the ringer in a way that I think they were trying to do it with, PSC basically ran them through the ringer in a way that I hadn't seen them do before. Like they gave them a crash course in all things neo-visual K, basically, is what it looked like based on the singles that they were putting out. I think they were trying to do that with the Lotus, and it didn't work out. And I think they hadn't again, all speculation, but like I think they maybe this was like what they were originally pushing on other bands, and maybe it didn't work out. But they were they basically you look through all of the singles that Rave put out on PSC. They started as this funky kind of like rave punk band, kind of like they used electronic music, like heading into PSC. They used electronic music. They used but then they also used like punk riffs, and he could scream, like the vocalist could scream if he wanted to, if he needed to. When they get on PSC, like the first thing they put out is this really catchy, really addictive, kind of like anime opening sounding song, but like with a ton of personality to it, to where it was like it didn't blend. It stuck out from like the myriad of other songs that like kind of sound the way that a lot of Kira K mainstream anime visual K, what do we call it, jaywalk sounds. But then like as they progressed, they would do different things. They would go back to like exploring the more punk side of their like this ravey pop punk sound that they had, and then they would do a single that was they did a single that was like super poppy, and then they went back and they put out a single, I think it was called Subcult, or I don't know if it's like shorthand kanji for subculture, but that was like a version 2.0 of their original indie sound. And then like as they put out their first album, like they did some pseudo angurake, if you want to call it that, experimentation, where they had like a song with traditional music, like backing tracks and stuff like that, but it was like a really catchy kind of fast-paced kind of song. And then like the PV track on their first full album was like their guitarist had passed away. It was kind of a pretty sad event, and it was a very sad, slow ballad. So they really like ran them through the ringer, and they got through like all these different styles and sounds. And the last one they got through was basically what I've started to call Oshare-core, which was they basically did like it was kind of like what happened with Sug with their last single on PSC, which was Sweet Toxic. Sweet Toxic was actually a double A-side. The second A-side was Fat Inside Horror, which there is a PV for, and Takeru's dressed very emo goth kind of, and it's like a pseudo hardcore song, pseudo metalcore song. Something similar, Rave put out something similar as their last single on PSC, except it was actually grittier, a little bit heavier. And then they announced that they were leaving PSC to go indie. And I guess that last thing that they tried, or that PSC had them try, or that they tried on their own, I won't make full assumptions, I guess. I'm couching all my statements in disclaimers and allegedly's, basically. Yeah, so that last sound they tried, basically they've been like trying to do this kind of heavy Osharike sound, and now they're kind of somewhere in terms of like Arshite levels of heavy with their most recent single, I think. But they put out a mini album, and it was very, very surreal, very interesting. But they did all this as a on their own, or they they're on I believe they're on an indie label. But they left PSC is the main point. I can look up where they went later, but yeah. So I think that's about all of the general. Okay, so let's so that's like the general summary of like all the hits, all like we went through the rise, we kind of went through the fall, like it's not even a patch, it's like just a rough streak, So who's left over? So you have the Gazette, kind of, and they're like, they're obviously still working together. They're doing just fine. They're they're getting bigger and bigger. Their music is as solid as it's ever been. Unless you want them to go back to dim, in which case stop wanting them to go back to dim. They're not doing that. They already trolled you with Ominous and Project Dark Age. Don't give up. There's okay, so Kara. Kara's doing okay, but I actually noticed that they've never really been that popular commercially. So they've kind of always just kind of been there on PSC. And it's unfortunate because Kara is actually very good and they've been around for a long time. From what I understand, their fans are a lot of them are a bit older. Like they're from they're fans from the 2000s. And they've stuck around. So they definitely still have an audience, but for example, I think the highest they've ever gotten in terms of any release is that they had a single in 2016 hit number 23 on the Oricon charts. And then there was another one in 2009 that hit 24, and then another one in 2008 that hit 23 again. So that's the highest they've ever done is it on the in terms of commercial success. So I'm very curious about their latest album, by the way, which they put out on Halloween. It sounds like an interesting sound that they're trying out. But unfortunately, I don't think they've ever been a full on stadium filler kind of a band. They're kind of they're just a bit more of a artsy, classy kind of band. It's more there's no reason that they shouldn't be popular, maybe beyond the fact that I don't think they do a lot of overtly mainstream facing interaction from their music. Even though their music is a bit lighter, it's got their own kind of touch on it. I don't know why they haven't been, it must just be that, I suppose. This album that they're doing now definitely is they're going off on their own and experimenting, way outside of what you would call mainstream friendly stuff or whatever. But their music is good. It's good stuff. It's artistic. It's artistically composed. It's very, you can tell there's a lot of talent in the band. So I don't know. They wouldn't be what you would consider a heavy hitter, I suppose, but they're too good to let go. You wouldn't want, you would want to brag that you have Kara, I suppose, on your label. They're worth bringing up because there are people that are dedicated. They've got a solid medium-sized fan base, but compared to a band like the Gazette, obviously, which is a ridiculous comparison to make usually, but even a band like Alice 9 when they were on PSC, I think Alice 9 was a bit bigger, possibly. It's hard to say in based off the top of my head. Okay, who else we got? So we have Naoki. Naoki is a solo project for this is Kagra's former bassist. So he just kind of has a solo project. He's a bassist. It's a lot of solo projects is the thing. That no other bands really. Reno is did I forget to look up Reno? Oh God, I forget. If someone in chat wants to remind me. Okay, yeah, so Reno was the lead guitarist of Vivid. This is his solo project. Who else we got? Refrain is now currently a solo project, apparently. It started as a two-man band, but it's down to just the vocalist / guitarist. So this guy is actually Ryoga. who's the other guitarist from Vivid, I believe. So a lot of fragmentation here, you could say. And then K is actually he's the former guitarist from Born. And I'm most familiar with his music out of these solo projects, I think. And I will say it's nothing too special. Like, he's still trying to figure out his sound. It's a lot of anime choruses and electronic music and, like, you know, lunacy song structures and jaywalk kind of stuff, basically. But like, there's potential. It's just it's a lot of that. And you know, he's got auto-tune on his voice since he started with that. I think it's less now since, like, you know, he was a guitarist as he learns to sing, I suppose. So that's where that's where we're at right now. So quite a different quite a change, you know, so what happened, I guess, you know, like, and you guys, and honestly, you guys can tell me in chat, you know, what happened and this and that. Honestly, I think, you know, I think the main theory I see from fans and stuff like that is that, you know, PSC just really drummed out, like, a lot of their, you know, pushed away a lot of their artists based on, because of, like, trying to steer them into following, like, the direction of, like, more successful bands like Alice 9 at the time, or particularly the Gazette. And I think that's probably the case. I do see a lot of bad luck in here. I think it's the case to maybe to a smaller extent than a lot of people say it. Like, they look at, they kind of look at the company like it's like this big evil, like, I guess, like, sellout corporation that's trying to manufacture, you know, the most bland, you know, music possible to sell to people, to sell to as many people as possible. And my question about that is, like, okay, but if that's the case, like, then why didn't they ever do that to the Gazette? Because the Gazette has had like more and less successful albums in recent years. Like, there wasn't, like, a hard, like, they've been taking risks and they've paid for it with their singles in Project Dark Age didn't break the top 10. That's kind of abnormal. Well, I think, yeah, I think so. At least Ugly didn't, you know, and that's kind of abnormal for them. You know, but it's like, where was the clamp down? You know, like, where was the, no, you need to be more like, Acid Black Cherry, you know, why aren't you more like Acid Black Cherry? Why aren't you more like Vamps, you know? Like that kind of a stuff. They've just let them go heavier and heavier, in spite of the fact that they've gone lighter and lighter. And, like, with Rave leaving, like they left, and you know, maybe there was some music that they put out on PSC that I didn't feel was fully authentic. But it was, you could tell they were, like, just trying a bunch of different stuff, and they left a much better band than when they came in. There's no way they'd be able to, like, be able to pull off, like, the kind of metalcore stuff that they're doing now and keep it in that Osharike attitude. That at the same time, like, they weren't that band going in. Like, they were clever. They were a clever band. They were good. They had a lot of potential, but, like, they were not in a position to have the polish that, like, you know, their newer stuff now has, even after PSC. So I think there's a little bit, I definitely think it's substantial. I don't think it's the overwhelming thing, I guess, is my thing. It seems to me more than anything that it's like, what I'm noticing for a lot of these bands is that, it's sort of the sudden shift after a lot of these bands left PSC almost feels like they're catching up to the trends, to, like, what where everybody's artistic flow is at. It's almost like they had to catch up to the indie scene, I guess. Like, you know, Sug went like kind of harder and like toned down their style, like color wise, but they kept like a lot of their core sound. It's just that they tried a whole bunch of stuff like early on with like their singles and stuff like that. And by the time they got to Black, their first full album post PSC, they had like a really solid street gothic sound going on, and it was like, you know, it was fresh. It was very fresh, but it was almost like very frantic experimentation getting there. You know, it felt like they were trying to catch up. And then like with A9, Alice 9 becoming A9, they like started out their first few releases. It still sounded very Alice 9. It's just that it was more instrumentation focused and less like backing tracks from like pop music or electronic music. It was just all very like the instrumentation, because the A9 guitarists and bassists, everybody in that band's actually low key really talented. So if they want to shred, they can shred, you know, like that kind of a thing. But then they ended up integrating kind of like some of the sounds that Sho had experimented with when he went off with one of the guitarists. Forgive me, I'm forgetting which guitarist it was, and started that side project together, Dial Wolf, where it was like a lot of electronic core stuff. They ended up bringing that into their music, and then it was like so then like their first album almost felt like a huge catch up of like integrating like a bunch of different sounds that they hadn't gotten to try, which is they'd done electronic stuff, but it had only been from the poppy mainstream friendly side. They didn't get to try the heavier stuff until they were, you know, like out of PSC. So like if you remember their first full album, Ideal, like it was almost like they were recapping like their like the best and most original sounds of their career in PSC, and at the same time injecting a bunch of like experimentation with like production and electronic music and more modern things that the current bands or like that were doing. That was like the latest and greatest kind of thing. And they still continue to rapidly like evolve and experiment. So I feel like they're still trying to get everything out of their system, especially with the last album that they put out. Like I don't think they're even remotely close to like being fully caught up, so to speak. Doubt did a similar thing. They've kind of been a little bit more like the sound itself is kind of largely the same, but again, like the song structures and stuff, they switched it up a lot to match the more indie song structures, which are wild, kind of like shifting, like, you know, in like throughout the song, very unpredictable, and experimenting with different styles and things like that a little bit as well, you know. So what that's telling me is that while they were on PSC, those bands were not able to adapt to the shifting trends of the visual kei industry, because as big as PSC was, they weren't the only they weren't the end all be all of the industry. So if there's other bands out there, especially on major labels, or just bands that just have a lot of reach and influence that you know, are able to be more flexible and more original and flow with roll with trends a lot more, you know, that's going to be really tough competition for them. So the fact that all these bands, like, they went indie and then it's like they went in catch-up mode for like anywhere between 6 months and 2 years, it kind of just really screams out to me that it's like at PSC there was a real struggle. Speculation again. At PSC there was like a real struggle to adapt to the changing trends of visual kei, especially post 2010. Because in the since 2010, shit's gotten wild, like with visual kei. Like the trends have gotten are shifting more and more, I guess. Well, I mean, there's no pattern. There's no pattern basically. Like it's like something like the electronic music will stick around for like 3, 4, or 5 years, and then all of a sudden this heavy thing will come out for a year and a half, and now we're at God knows where, because like the Oshara K is heavy, the metal, the Angra K bands are turning into Nagoya K bands, and like yeah, like it's just all over the place. I can't even describe Visual K right now. Tora and Show were Direwolf. Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, so I think that's the main issue, is that like evolving with the times, getting with the times and stuff like that. I think that's a bigger issue than people give credit for, because when Garugamesh came back with their new sound, they were still on Danger Crew Records, and they were able to get out that slick, you know, I guess gent core and electronic core, or I guess like gent metal and electronic core fusion sound that was really slick. It was really fresh. It drummed up a lot of attention. At the same time, you had bands on Danger Crew before they all dropped off, along with Garugamesh, like Camelio. Like they were actually able to get with the times a few years further than PSC was able to. So and when you had bands like Camellia that were, yeah, okay, we're going to experiment with pop music and electronic music, but we're going to do it in like a really like creative ways, or ways that other bands would be terrified to do. What Visual K band's going to do an idol group gag, for their singles and stuff like that. So it's possible for larger bands to obviously like continue rolling with like the shifting trends of like the music industry, both whether it's in or outside of Japan. And I whatever was going on with at PSC, my speculation is that was not able to happen. It seems like it was almost there with Rave, which is the last departure we've had. The last, it's really the last new. They're one of the newer bands that had been signed, and they're one of the they were the last departure that they had, I believe. So it was like closer now, but it may just be too little, too late. Like the solo projects, usually most of these solo projects that I've seen, I think I've seen previews for a few of them. It's nothing super fresh or interesting. But what is carrying Team PSC right now, I will say, is has been the Gazette for a very long time, and Kara really seems to be coming up with some fresh sounds lately as well. So Kara's usually off doing their own thing, doing whatever it feels like. But I didn't expect the sound that they were putting out in their PV preview for this album. So at least they've got those. Like that's yeah. So realistically, I guess like I guess the companies that are the major labels that are doing the best right now, in terms of following those trends, I would say aren't actually major labels. It's the indie labels that are acting like major labels, specifically BP Records. Like BP Records is kind of killing it in terms of business. Like, we were talking about it last night. They're just on a constant cycle of just cranking out content. With Roy's and Kiryu and Komodo Dragon, and every time they go through a phase where I'm like, oh, I don't know, have these guys run out of gas? From such a constant release cycle, like something happens, some adjustment must be made behind the scenes, I guess, and they'll like come back with something that I'm like super all about, and I would say Goemon Records is like they're trying to become where BP Records was a few years ago. They're gunning for BP Records, I think. Some healthy competition. It's always nice to have. So like labels like those are better at being are starting to become better at being major than the major labels are. I would say. I mean, I think it's kind of obvious at like this point. It's demonstrable. And even like individual indie bands that it's just like they're signed to whatever label and they're just as a band, they are so popular even though they're indie that it's like you might as well look at them like a major band. Like Archite, like I look at Archite like a major band even though they are an indie band. I believe they're an indie band. They're definitely not on some like huge like they, you know, huge record label and all that stuff. They just have a lot of fans and they've done a lot of different sounds and styles and they've just sold a lot and they've continually progressed. But they really have figured out a way to act like a major band while being an indie band. Diora was doing that for a while too. I like Diora is also quite popular. Their live concerts are better than some major bands concerts, I would say, in Visual K. So. Yeah, so like until you get like and the last point I'll add in defense of big record labels like this, I guess, is that corporations are very, very slow moving organizations. They're very speaking as someone who's been setting up his own personal corporation just with 0 employees, just myself and everything like that, even the process involved in it, it's very slow, it's very meticulous, and like it's like an iceberg. And if you've ever worked at a large corporation, you know it takes forever and a day for anything to happen, and that's just because it's as far as everyone can tell, it's the best system we've got for running a business on a massive scale like this. So you know, there may only be so much that can be done, you know, in terms of running major record labels as these giant corporations with multiple bands on them. I'm personally of the opinion that major record labels won't exist one day. It may be more likely to happen in Japan or in the Visual K industry than like here in the States. Here in the States, it's all kind of weird because a lot of the record labels have gotten copyright laws passed that give them strangleholds on music rights. So it's kind of hard for so they kind of, that's a whole thing. I might do a stream on that. That's just crazy. But I'm personally of the opinion that as time goes on, more and more tools are made available to indie artists that allow them to manage themselves like a company, like a label, basically. And as that continues, the need, for like a major label will continue to decrease. You only need a bunch of funding for a tour or a music video if the tour or the music video costs a lot of money. So, all the digital stuff like the audio and the video, that's come first, obviously, because it's, that's all digital stuff, and the software and technology like that gets super cheap. And then the hardware is a little bit slower to catch on. So like more physical things like performances, that's usually what you would need like a label's backing for. So, but even with that, like as time goes on, the costs for all these things go down, and they go down drastically, like over time. Like go look up how much an iPhone 5S is now. Did anyone have an iPhone 5S or a iPhone 4 or an iPod back in the day? Like that shit, stuff like that is dirt cheap. That's the easiest example I can give. But so yeah, we may not even have a need for them in the future, but because I think one band making a corporation for itself and running itself, which is apparently what's going on with the Gazette, by the way, seems to be like a perfectly reasonable final destination. So I guess we'll see. Otherwise, they're gonna have to figure something out. I guess so. That's the tale of PSC. That's all my speculation on PSC. Everything I gave that, if any of that was like a hot take or anything, it's all speculation. I don't have any inside knowledge or anything like that. So, yeah. This stream ended up being twice as long, exactly twice as long as I was hoping for. I realized that while I was researching today, because it ended up taking me all afternoon. When I thought it was just going to take I thought it was just going to take a few hours because I'd had links and stuff, pulled up in the past, but like I fell down the rabbit hole, as Kimiko said in the chat. So yeah, that's that. Let me check out the live chat, see what people are saying. Let me take a swig real quick. Sorry, guys. Hope the stream ended up not buffering anymore. I feel like the storm's passed. I feel he was just leaving when I started. Wow, am I the only one in the chat without a wrench? I can give you a wrench. Girl, I can give you a wrench. There, I made you a wrench. Okay, but now that I've given girl a wrench, because she said, oh, wow, am I the only one in the chat with a wrench, or without a wrench? You guys have to go recruit more people to come in so that it's not just all wrenches when I put the chat up on screen. Because that's like a weird look. That's like either it looks like either it looks bad or people are gonna look at me weird. Like, did you just give everybody a wrench that joins the chat? And it's like, no. So you guys gotta go out and actively recruit and drag people in now. We've hit the wrench wench quota. It's time to become the wrench wench recruitment squad. This is more of these are some more low-key streams though. The bigger ones on Saturday. So let's see. I miss Kazuki. Yeah. Asuka says in 2005 they decided some or all of the bands under them would have to be signed to a major label. That's when the Gazette got signed to King Records. Ah, okay, I see. The terrible 2009 photos add to the vibe, honestly. yeah, it's shout out to shout out to high school, basically. Rip Vivid, yep. Sunrise PV by Doubt was my fave. Yeah, I agree, Kimiko. That was like the song that hooked me on Doubt. Like that was that's definitely up there for me. Full Visual Miyavi was top tier, let's be honest. I don't know. He's done some really cool stuff with electronic music that I really like. Really like. I don't know if I could... Like, when he did Day One, my mind melted. And then with this in-crowd song, like, that's a song I can show even, like, my friends that are just listening to EDM to rage, and they're like, dude, this is really good. Like, I don't know. I feel like he's like behind enemy lines in the mainstream right now. It would be crazy if he went back and did a neovisualism like return, given what he knows now, because it would be like the most well-produced Visual K album of like all time, probably. Kimiko says, I do miss Sug. Yeah, me too. Sug also sort of implied they were being pushed in a direction they didn't want to go in, from what I remember. Oh, yeah. I think that was left before I read that out. Let me check the dashboard real quick. Make sure we're all good here. Okay, cool. Um, Doubt went indie. So close to playing over here in the States. My heart hurts. Yeah, I would love to see Doubt come over. Honestly, there's like a lot of these indie bands that are sticking around. If they're making enough money, they could just kind of pool together and just kind of, you know, sign an agreement, set up an event in the States, and just all kind of come over together. Like bands like Doubt, bands like, like A9, bands like, I'm not sure how well A9's been selling recently, but if they're selling well, if they, bands like Diora, bands like Archite, stuff like that, Aoi and Rada both have jewelry lines. Oh yeah, I remember that now. Yeah. There's just so much to that could be managed. Rookie's Nil Dun Nil Un is entirely his own. Oh, okay. Well, it's still now that it's it's smart because it's under Heresy. It's not the Gazette Incorporated. So if Rookie ever needs a company, a corporation to go through for any projects that like he wants, or he just needs to contract out something, like if Harrison Incorporated is going to start setting up distribution, for example, like, or any of them, if they need, distribution, like that's usually what the corporation is for, is like for like setting up processes to get more product out there. And that's not the only thing, but like that's the first thing that's popping to my mind. They don't give a fuck, the Gazette. Yeah, I agree, Kimiko. At this point, I pretty much agree with that. Yeah, fucks are not being given right now. This is what happens when you want to make a band like another band instead of helping them grow organically into their own thing. Yeah, and that's like old news in terms of a problem. Like we've had that's our entire music industry here in the States. Like our whole music industry is, last I checked, it's just slimy and gross. Like the mainstream, with the major labels and everything. Like, what else? It seems like companies like that tend to have one or two bands they're really good to and treat the rest not so well, but that's just something I've heard. Yeah, it's possible. There is only like so much resources to go around. So if you're not good about managing your resources, someone's not going to get the help they need to succeed. Girl says literally on Archite's website, instead of saying like copyright such as such company, it says copyright Archite, lol. Yeah, man, that's I fucking love it. They are just LARPing as a major band. Like you look at their PVs, they're shot like major bands PVs, but like a little bit fresher and cooler and stuff. But it's like they're shot with that level, It's like it's really impressive for a band that's never gone major. I genuinely have no idea who they're under, if anyone. I think they're under. I think we found it one time for Archite. I think it's Speed Disc, or something like that. But I'm not sure. Or Disc Garage, something like that. But I couldn't determine if it was just for like a distributor, like a publisher. I don't think it was an actual label. So If it's saying copyright Archite, then they're probably full on indie. Kimiko had the clicker wheel iPod. Oh, there it is. Archite's on speed disk apparently. Yeah. Okay. That's right. Sho did say he wanted to play overseas more. Rad market if for the Gazette. Yeah. I'm rooting for A9, man. They're really experimenting right now. So, yeah, unfortunately, and a lot of the bands like haven't fully survived. Historically from shifting like that. So, Rad market is for the Gazette. I see. Yeah, a lot of bands haven't survived the shift to going from PSC to indie. So we'll see. I'm pulling for them because I like what they're doing. I like their style. I'm listening to them like, I like your style, kid. You got a little rough around the edges, but I like your style. Keep it up. I like how crazy they go with it these days. So. Okay, well, that's going to be the end of the stream, I think, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Kimiko for suggesting these topics, for supporting us on Patreon as much as you do, and for being so extra patient with me as I've had to put off doing these more for so long. We're going to have your last 2 requests up as well. I'm paying her back. I'm paying Kimiko back with interest, as the 2 tomorrow were requests for artist profiles. I'm going to have we're going to have artist profile articles out for Oblivion Dust and Christ Plus. I don't know if you say the plus part of it, but which is Screws, the ex-Screw vocalist Bio. It's his new band. And then Oblivion Dust is I'm drawing a brain fart. The Vamps guitarist. Oh my god. Kaz. Yeah, is Kaz's band. So we're gonna have artist profile articles up tomorrow, and then we're gonna do streams on it in the evening as interest, pay back with interest. So if you guys would like to support us, you can check us out at the Patreon link in the description. I may have an announcement stream later on this week. I'm going to be updating the Patreon rewards to do like what I said I would do in the Patreon description, which is that I'm going to be changing the tiers a little bit so that you're getting more for what you're paying over time. Like I wanted to just keep doing that. So for the lower tiers, especially, you're going to be getting like a lot more stuff in the near future. So you can look out for an announcement for that pretty soon. Yeah. Okay. So for the next stream, we'll start it at 10:30. Just give me 15 minutes to get set up for that. We're obviously way late. I apologize for that. Yeah, I guess the reality of the situation is that like this just needed to take this long because my God, there's a lot to go through. So, did I miss the list of underrated band stream while I was away? No, that's next. So it's going to start in about a little over 15 minutes at 10:30. I'm all set up with my streaming and everything, so we'll be able to go start right on time. So, all right, we'll see you guys soon. Peace.